Hey guys, so I just wanted to make a quick video about Lightroom, kind of like a more concise version from what I've uploaded into Dropbox from our first class. So for example, another note on digital asset management, here is my external hard drive, and I'll show you how I kind of organize things. And I'm by no means like a hard drive expert or anything, but as you can see, I have lots of these type of things, but for me, mostly I use this one. I just go to photo shoots, click on that, and then I have it organized by year, so I can literally go to any year, click on that, and then each year has a selection of different categories that I photographed. So I could click on like engagement, and then these would all be the engagement shoots I shot that year, and I can literally go into each one, and there's a raw file. And in that raw file, I have all of the images from that shoot. It's taking a little bit to load, but yeah, all those images will pop up. So I keep all the raw files of everything, just in case I need to go back and re-edit something, or it's just good to have. I'm not required to keep these. I just kind of keep them until I run out of space, which is basically what I've been doing. As you can tell, I literally have not gotten rid of anything, so it's definitely time to purge because, yeah, I need to do that. Well, that's also why I switched over to Pass Plus Gallery, that service I was telling you about that backs the images up for 10 years. It's $30 a month, but even if you stop paying the monthly fee, your images are backed up from the time that the gallery goes live. So let's do an experiment. So let's say that I've done a studio shoot. I did a shoot recently with Numa models on the weekend, so I made a, ignore this catalog that I made on my desktop for now, because I'll blend that into the master catalog later. But basically, each model that I photographed, I made a folder for them within my Numa models folder on my desktop, which I have already copied to the fashion folder in 2018 photo shoots within my external hard drive. But for the sake of this, let's pretend like we haven't done that yet. So we're going to open up Lightroom, which is Adobe Lightroom Classic CC, not the other weird one that doesn't have a ton of options. This is weird. I've never seen that. Okay. I just did this headshot shoot today, so I'll get out of there. Okay, so let's open a new catalog, and we will name it whatever your client or vacation or whatnot. And I can say that on the desktop for now, and then later I'm going to merge this catalog into my 2018 master catalog. Now, if you do not want to have like a year catalog for everything you shot that year, I just recommend that because you can work on different shoots at the same time if you're exporting, importing, that type of thing. You can definitely keep it separate. So I could have a separate Numa Models catalog, which I will keep with the raw files on my external hard drive. And I will still do that anyway, so I have kind of a backup of each individual shoot catalog, because usually I'm making it anyway if I'm on location and I'm having people like rate their images and things like that. So we'll create, I'm going to call this, put a big tent at the front so I know I can delete this one and not the other one. Great, so now we have an empty catalog that we've opened for that particular shoot or for the year. And I want to import my images. I'm going to go Import Photos and Video. Now if you plug in your camera card via a camera card reader or directly into your laptop if that's capable, then it should pop up automatically, the import window. Or iPhoto, or both. So remember the import dialog box shows up. On the left side you have how to import images, where you imported them from, and in the middle the images, a preview of what you have selected for importation. At the top, what you want to do with them, and to the right, how you want them to be handled after they're imported. So let's go into my Numa models on my desktop here. I'm going to go here. Great. And then if I even wanted to, I can go in further and only pick ones from certain models. But I'm going to import all of them. Actually, that's over 1,000 images. Maybe I'll just import a few of these. Let's see. I will do the bottom two. So I'm going to import those. And at the top, I'm making sure that I'm adding photos to catalog without moving them because they're already on my hard drive. And if I want to also copy them to Drobo from my hard drive, then I could also do copy photos to location and add to catalog. There's tons of different things you can do here, but usually the only one I really do is add or move. So move will automatically, I believe, be selected from your camera card reader because generally it knows that you don't want to store them on your camera card, but just in case, make sure that it's add when you are, make sure it's add when it's on your desktop. If you plug your camera card in, make sure that it's copy. So for the sake of this, I'm going to add it because they're already on my computer. So basically, these previews here, just keep it at minimal unless you have a ton of time to kill. And I'll show you more what the previews mean exactly in the library module, but basically if you want to do standard or one-to-one, that means you don't have to wait every time you go to the next image for it to render so you can see if it's in focus or not. And that's really helpful for me because every time I have to wait for a second for that photo to render, it adds up into like an hour of wasted time just like waiting for images to render as I'm trying to like pick the best ones from like a wedding or an event. So I'll often import them as one-to-one previews, which takes much longer, but then I can walk away and like work on something else or watch a movie or something, and then I can come back and it's good. And Smart Previews is something different altogether. It's basically one-to-one previews, but not to the original file. And that only comes in handy in certain times. So don't really worry about that for now. It's a bit more of an advanced thing. Don't import suspect duplicates. This one's a really big one because if you have a memory card that you're continually shooting on without dumping per shoot, then unless you have this selected, it's going to re-import every photo that you've ever imported to that catalog every time. So click on this, and you can actually see a preview of that too. Like if I'd already imported this one from a previous shoot, then it would just be blank like that. Great, and then of course I've got my develop settings. I have this little like film curve thing that makes it kind of look like film, which is kind of fun. And I'll import that like that. I don't normally spend too much time in the import dialog. Pretty basic stuff. All right, cool. So you can see it's importing now. And on the left-hand side, it will tell you what you're looking at. Right now I'm looking at previous import. I like to switch back to all photographs each time, just in case I get confused about where the other images are. We'll close that now. And then folders, it will tell you where they're coming from. So you can see right on my hard drive is where I'm getting these images. And I can right-click to show parent folder to take me back to the original kind of like parent folder of where these images are actually living in case I get confused about where they are. Because I might have moved them by accident, and then that's where this really comes in handy about where they used to be. I can kind of backtrack that way if I ever make a mistake, which we won't because we're always going to store our images on an external hard drive. Yay! Great, and don't worry about those things. So I don't honestly spend too much time in the library module. Most of my time is spent into the develop once I actually get the images in here. Like I said, sometimes I'll do like an auto tone. You can see it kind of brought back some stuff there, and that's a good place to start. But I usually go right into develop here. Okay, so let's rate these together. So let's say we're going through here, and as you can see, if I zoom in, it takes a little bit to render properly, so you can see if it's in focus or not. I was really off on my focus there, guys. Super shallow of me. Okay, so you can see my focus is good there. But click on the next one, you have to wait a little bit for it to render. Now, if I rendered one-to-one previews, it would happen instantly, and this little like doohickey down here wouldn't take its sweet time. So that's something to consider if you don't want to like sit there and wait. This isn't that bad though. Okay, cool. So we start from the beginning usually, and I'm like, okay, let's reset those develop settings on the side. So this is the original file, and normally I might be like, oh, I'm not going to rate that one, but wait, I shot in RAW. So I can actually recover some of those. I can drag the highlights down to just focus on the highlights only, or exposure to drag down both the shadows and the highlights, or I can use that with my histogram and drag it like this, which is great. And now I like the image better, so and it's in focus, so I can give it a star. I can keep going, star that, and then maybe one of these needs to go into Photoshop. Maybe I want to take this into Photoshop to remove this better. I can try to remove it with the spot tool, and I'll just be like, okay, cool, just take that out. Oh, see, the spot tool doesn't actually do it very well. That was better, because I went from a different direction. It's kind of odd like that. But if I want to really take care of that in Photoshop and kind of expand this over there, then I might hit number 7 to give it a yellow label, and then after I know that all the yellow labels go into Photoshop, or I can just go along and edit each one to finality before I move on to the next one. But I kind of like to rate it like this because it feels less overwhelming that way, and I can see my progress better. So often I get this little like bar to the middle, and I'm like, yay, I'm halfway. So that's always kind of encouraging, even if you still have to take it in. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll write something, and I'll be like, okay, well this is perfect, except I need to take into Photoshop because I can only do so much for her skin within Lightroom. Lightroom isn't really like a skin retouching agent. There's things that you can do. For example, you take those lines out with the spot removal tool, like that. But like I said, sometimes it gets a little weird. It's great for stuff like this though. Small blemishes are perfect. Get rid of like freckles and stuff, and like small wrinkles and things like that. Not that she has any wrinkles. So then you get rid of things like that pretty easily. And if you wanted to do something like pretty basic as far as skin retouching goes, then you could take your localized brush adjustment. And for some reason, sometimes it starts with certain of these things already adjusted. And remember, if you double click on the word, it bounces it back to 0. So maybe I'll like paint on where I want the technique to be applied to, and then I can adjust where I just painted. So I'm going to turn my sharpness all the way down and my clarity all the way down. And you can see it adds like a blur. So that's like kind of a quick and dirty way to like retouch skin. And then every time you paint, that setting is applied. So that's a fun, quick and dirty way. We're going to get more into this when we actually do the retouching class for skin, but for the most part we're going to be doing our retouching in Photoshop because this is as good as that gets in Lightroom. And what's cool is that every adjustment that you can do here, you can turn off and on with this little light switch that's below each area on the develop module. So you can see by turning that off and on what that looks like before and after for only that adjustment, which is great. Oh, oftentimes you'll notice something that kind of tricks me out sometimes is see this basic menu here? Now you'll spend most of your time within this basic menu, but each one of these localized adjustments has its own basic menu that looks just like it. So sometimes I'm adjusting these thinking like, oh, what the hell, like why isn't it working? And it's because I'm only adjusting a local adjustment if I were to put one down. So keep that in mind. If you think it's not working, you're probably in one of these menus and not in the basic menu here. So that's why sometimes I'll like close as I go along type kind of thing. Great. And you know what's funny is that I actually had the models rate their images, so I knew exactly what to edit. So you can just actually watch me get some legit work done if you like, and maybe learn something. Hopefully that's my end goal after all. Real quick, I want to do a shout out to Cindy, who sent me some epic HDR images, as well as a question. So the question was, how do I export images that are not JPEG if I don't want to do that? So when you are ready to export an image, so these are her final images. So if I was ready to export this folder, this file, I would right click and go export, export, and this brings up the export dialog box. So it looks complicated, but it actually isn't that bad. So just do one thing at a time. Where would you like it to export? So for example, I can choose to browse where I would like it to export. Generally, if I'm setting it out, I'm going to make a temporary folder on my desktop. So I could say temp Victoria model, and then choose that. Or you can make a folder saying models, and then put subfolder Victoria, however you wanted to organize that. And then you can rename it. This is really fun. So instead of being like, you know, number underscore DSC, that type of thing, you can rename it to Victoria. You can do start number, and you can switch it up. This is generally like 99% of how I name things. So it's nice and digestible for the client. Or you can do original file name with the sequence. You can do the date. You can do a custom name, all sorts of different stuff, which is great. And there's no video for this, so don't worry about that. And this is where you can change your image formats in the file settings. So 99% of the time, I'm doing the quality at 100% with JPEG with a color space of sRGB. There's different color spaces, but this is the one that looks the nicest on all different type of monitors and things like that. Now, if you are exporting for a web, if you just want to export to share on Facebook and things like that, you can limit the size to 1000K or 2000K, and that just means that that's the longest pixels across. So because this is a vertical image, then the longest side would be 1000K, that would be like the length of the image. But I would not recommend exporting that if you're planning on printing the image, or if you want something really super high quality, if it's being watched on like a 4K monitor or something. But yeah, so make sure that you don't have that checked if you don't want that to be checked, because I've done that before. I've accidentally sent some files that needed to be blown up, and it wasn't the right, so I had to go back and re-export them, because this dialog box will remember exactly what your last settings were. Cool, and same thing here. If you need something more specific, if you're doing a blog and you need 1100 square pixels wide by different heights, then you can resize it within here, which is really handy. But for the most part, I just keep my quality at max, and when you are resizing, keep your resolution to 240 to 300 because that's going to still have like the nicest resolution. And you can do some different sharpening. I don't really worry about that though, because I do all my sharpening exactly how I want it already within Lightroom. Don't worry about the metadata too much. This is where you get really nerdy with stuff that I don't really bother with. Watermarking, if you want to watermark your images, I've got like a proof one and like a caked photo one. So the proof has like a proof right across it, and it has like it's kind of transparent a little bit, so you can see underneath it. And then the caked photo one is kind of my signature for like Facebook's, and that's just a small thing to the lower right. And you can make your watermarks right within Lightroom, which is great. You just import a graphic, or you can do just text, and it helps. And then after export, you can say like, okay, I also want you to open it in these other things, but I've never actually used that. So the only ones I really use, I don't really use the watermarking one that often. The only ones I really use are these three imports. Where is it going? What do I want the file name to be renamed? And what is the image quality that I want? Sometimes I will change it to an original, and that's the raw file. If I'm transferring it to my editor and I want to rename the custom text, I'll just run it through here. And if you are doing original, it takes absolutely like no time at all to export, because it's not doing that magic, because it's not applying any of the settings that I have. And I guess that's really important to note is, unless it is a JPEG, a PSD, TIFF, or DNG, like these guys will apply the magic that you've applied within Lightroom, but this one will spit it out exactly as it came in, regardless of any settings you've applied to it within Lightroom. So I would stick to JPEG or your TIFF file. Those are the ones that you're going to want to use in print, and those are the ones that people are going to be able to read very easily. If you're sending it to another photographer and you want their opinion on it and want some help editing it, then a DNG is great. Or a PSD file, which is a Photoshop file. All right, hopefully that was helpful for you guys. So basically we'll just export this, and you can see that it's exporting up here, and then it's already made the folder on my desktop. So I didn't actually have to make this folder, because I told my Lightroom export dialog box to make a folder called temp Victoria model, and inside there, Victoria-1 is already there, which is great. So that's what you do at the end. So let's get back to the middle, where we're actually going to retouch this. So these are the photos that Victoria chose. So the first thing that I do, and I have done a little bit of an edit on this already, so I can show you the actual raw file here. But first, very great tip is to, if you're on a Mac, hit the Command button and quotation marks, and it makes a virtual copy of whatever image you are on. So you can see this is 1 of 2, and this is 2 of 2 now. And what's cool about that is, instead of like toggling back and forth, you can make 2 different versions very easily. This is especially helpful when you want to deliver, when you want a picture in black and white and color, because now you've just been able to do that very easily. But for this example, I want to show you before and after. So this is the original file, like right out of my camera. And then you have what I showed her in order to get her to like the image right off the get-go. So how did I get from here to here with like extremely basic retouching? I will show you. So as you know, I like my lines to be nice and straight, and this is a little bit crooked because it's really hard to focus on that when you're shooting. So the first thing I do is my lens corrections. I just click these 2 things. You don't really have to know what they mean, because they're kind of like chromatic aberration is a little bit more advanced, but basically just know that you don't really ever really want that. So click on those two, and as you can see when that happens, it gets rid of this vignette on the outside, because the natural vignette really happens, and the vignette is a darkening of corners. So that happens because the lens is round and the picture is not round. So essentially the distortion naturally darkens the edges down a little bit. So to remove that, you just enable profile corrections, which will read the actual lens profile that you used and everything. And if you don't like what it did, you can adjust the vignette here, a lighter one or a darker one. And there's some points where it's just about personal preference, but I prefer to have it really nice and bright. So the first thing I do is I fix the lens corrections, and I could probably also apply this upon import too if I was smart. And then I do transform, and if I want to make it level, I click level, and it fixes it for me. If I want vertical, I could just click that, and it fixes it for me. If you want both, you just click full, and it does it for you, but I already did it. And then click constrain crop, because if they have to make a lot of adjustments, then constraining crop is really helpful because it'll automatically crop it in for you. Great, so now that we've done that, there's some other things you can do. So first of all, the first thing I see if I squint my eyes is that this area is super bright. I'm going to lower the highlights, bring some of that detail back, bring up the contrast, because contrast almost always makes the photo look better. And I will also lower my exposure slightly, maybe, because I want to bring back some detail in this little hotspot here. But her face is always my focus, so I want to make sure that the eye is going to her face. So let's see how close we got. Relatively close. I also applied a preset, which I love. So as you can see over here, all presets are, in a nutshell, and I'll go over this more next class, so if you're not watching this video, then that's okay. But it is helpful if you want to get kind of a leg up and kind of get your bearings a bit better within Lightroom before Monday. So presets, all presets are is, it's like a virtual copy of this photo to demonstrate, command, quotation mark. So let's say I did a bunch of stuff to this image. I'm going to make it really blue and make it really obviously retouched in some crazy way. Great, and I'm like, awesome, I love what I just did there, and I want to save that for other photos. So I can click here and call it Crazy Cyan Look, and I can save it in a folder of my choice. So I'm going to save it in KGood Faves, and you can choose what of the effect that you like. So if I'm like, oh, I really love everything about it, I'll keep everything checked. But if I say like, oh, I don't really care for the transforming or the lens corrections on that image, but I want the treatment and the colors, then I'll keep those done. Create. And now it appears under my presets. So it's basically just a recording of what you've done to an image so that you can reuse it later. So for example, let's do another virtual copy of this image and apply it now. Create the sound, look, boom, now we get that, if that's what you're into. Great, so I have one here called Usually Works, because it usually works and I like the way it looks. And as you can see, it reset all of those adjustments that I made. So what I should do is go into Usually Works and resave it without applying those lens corrections and things like that, only because the lack of lens corrections will write over the lens corrections that you have on an image, because I checked it in the original preset saving, if that makes sense. So I got to go back and redo that. And it always kind of goes a little bit too orange for me, so I'm just going to lower that down, make it cooler. Great, and it's kind of like, retouching is kind of artistic, so you'll never really get like what you had before, but I like this one too, it's cool. And you go with that. I mean, you can get what you have, because then all you have to do is like, oh, actually, I really like what I did before. You hold that down, you select this, make sure that what's showing here is the one that you'd like to copy the settings from, and then you click the sync button down here. Same thing as the preset, you pick all the ones that you would like to apply. Generally speaking, you don't want these two checked because these are extremely localized to each image, like the crop of a photo and like blemish removal and things like that. But everything else is like more or less safe to do unless you don't want those applied. Synchronize, and then as you can see now, those images are the same except for I did not apply the crop, so I can apply the crop next. Let's go back and do that. Apply the crop, and then everything's great. So that's it for this video, and maybe I'll do another one where we're actually going to go in and I'll show you the Lightroom adjustments I can do to make these images even more boss. Thanks guys, let me know if you have any questions. Bye.